The WPT is doing a gigantic free roll, a $5 million free roll at the Wynn on December 13th during the WPT Championship. Each seat is worth at least $2,500, and they've given me some free seats to give away. All you have to do to get into the drawing for some of my seats is head over to clubwptgold.com and sign up using the code BART. Hello, Tony. You are up last, sir. Where are you playing out of, Tony?
I'm out here in the Seattle area.
In the Seattle area? Okay.
And it's a home game, 8-handed. It's 10-25 with a $25 ante, and there is a $50 straddle on.
Wow. So 10-25 with a $25 ante plus 50 in a Seattle area home game.
Yeah.
Okay. How deep are you?
I'm effective at 4,500.
45. Is this one of these professional home games? Like where they're taking a rake or?
No.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No rake.
No rake. Yeah.
Just tipping the dealer, and everybody's generous with the tips.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the whole thing. It was funny. If you watch the Jungle Man interview that I did a while back, I talked about insurance, how they're really big on insurance in China. It's really interesting. It's a way to sort of, you're supposed to take insurance when you're ahead, even though it's juiced really up as sort of a benefit to the house because in a private game, because they're the ones that are offering the insurance, but it's really terrible odds. You know, you might be ahead by you might be 80-20 favorite, and then they're giving you like 65 or 70% on your insurance, shit like that. But okay, so 10-25, $25 ante plus 50, 4,500 effective, okay?
Okay.
Yep.
And the cutoff opens for 150, and the button calls, and the small blind calls.
Okay.
And then I'm in the big blind, and I call with king 10 off, and a little loose there, but it's a home game.
Mm-hmm.
I have the king of hearts and 10 of spades.
Okay.
And then the straddle calls. So we go to the flop.
So I'm just going to stop you here real quick.
Yeah.
Just real quick, just about pre-flop. So cut off to 150, button calls, small blind calls. Hero is in the middle blind here in a 3-blind format with king 10 off. You're in for 25, so it's not like it's just like you're in for 50 and then it's 3x. I mean, this is a spot. I mean, I know there's two people, and you don't have a great hand here, right? It is a home game, so you kind of want to act loose. And believe me, like if I was at Hustler Casino Live, I would play this hand in some way, whether it's a 3-bet or call. But anytime you're in these middle blinds with the straddle to your left versus a late position open, you're definitely incentivized to 3-bet. That small blind, and you can tell me about these players, that's almost never going to be a strong hand. The fact that it's a cutoff open, which is late position, and then just a button call, it seems like the button's never going to be a strong hand. He's incentivized to 3-bet. So I feel like you could 3-bet here a lot if you wanted to play this hand. And as long as you got through the cutoff, you're going to win a lot. You're going to, take it down a lot. And then, of course, you want to drive the straddle out behind you. Those would be the reasons here for playing this as a 3-better or fold type of strategy in between.
Yeah, I like that thought process. In fact, that comes into play with the small blind, because the small blind is a 3-better fold small blind player, and he called. And so that's going to eliminate
He's
a lot of hands.
He's a 3-better fold player. You mean like you would 3-bet his strong hands, you mean?
If he's going to play in the small blind, typically he's 3-betting, and if he's not playing, he's folding. So I was caught off guard just a little bit by the fact that he smooth called.
Okay. All right, so 600 to the flop?
The flop, no, it's there's 5 of us, so it's
750 to the flop.
750 plus that extra $25 ante.
775.
Let's get it all in there. Yeah. 775.
Okay.
And the flop is queen 10-5, queen of spades, 10 of diamonds, 5 of hearts. The 5 of hearts is important.
Okay.
And so I've got middle pair with a good kicker.
Yep.
And it checks around.
Okay, so checks around. So you check to the pre-flop raiser, checks around. Okay, so it doesn't always. So I mean, a lot of times the way that I look at this spot is, who are the undefined hands, right? If people are naturally checking to the pre-flop raiser, we don't know the strength of the small blind or the straddle's hand. If you were in the straddle here, as opposed to in the big blind, and the big blind and the small blind were in the hand, and it got checked around, and the turn was a 3, and then the small blind and the big blind checked, you'd have more of a green light to bet, I feel like, because the pre-flop raiser has checked, the guy behind him's checked, and then the guys up front that checked blind on the flop have checked again on the turn. Here, you've got one guy that you don't know in the straddle to your left that if he's naturally checking the pre-flop raiser, we don't necessarily know if he has a queen. Okay, so he's checked her. By the way, the cutoff, some of these guys still might have queens. Sometimes people will check those types of holdings. But all right, still 70-75 to the turn.
Okay, and the turn is the 4 of hearts.
Putting a backdoor heart draw out there.
And at this point, the small blind bets out 850, over bets the pot.
Well, I don't know how you can call here, Tony.
Yeah. I find I'm in a really tough spot, but I know this player really well. He doesn't have pocket queens, doesn't have pocket tens. He doesn't have ace queen, doesn't have king queen. He would have 3-bet all of those hands. He could, I don't think he would have played queen 10 in the small blind. So he could have pocket fives. But I tell you what, with the second heart coming on, I feel like he has definitely got a draw. He's got the heart draw or king jack or I just feel like he's got the heart draw or king jack.
Well, the only thing that the reason why my gut reaction initially is it's very, 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 very fast fold, sort of goes back to preflop here too, which is you've got 3 people behind you in the straddle, the cutoff and the button. Now the cutoff and the button, obviously they didn't bet the flop. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have anything, behind you. So if you were heads up here in a certain situation, this would be a much easier call. Like somehow, say you had the pre-flop lead and you check back the flop and now this guy overbets turns, much easier call from you. Now, on your side of this, I'm just making the argument on your side of this. You could make the argument that because you think that you sort of know the small blind's range down so tightly that your call will basically get everyone else to fold out behind you. Like if the cutoff or the button did check a queen and you call this overbet, maybe they'll just fold out behind you. You still have an undefined hand though in the straddle behind you as well. So the fact that there's an undefined hand behind you, and also that, I'm saying that you could make the case that your call might get a queen to fold behind you. I don't know if that's the case actually. This is me making the argument. Those would be the reasons this would lead me towards a pretty fast fold, even if you do think you're ahead of the small blind.
Well, I'll tell you, the way I viewed it is I didn't like the spot at all, but I was so confident that the small blind was on a draw and that I wasn't going to get a call behind me that I thought I'm going to make this call.
Well, that makes sense.
And if I get a blank,
right?
If I get a blank on the river, and he's just not the type player that would just bluff it off right there.
Listen, that logic, Tony, makes perfect sense. It is the argument for you making the call. The logic makes sense. My counter to that though is that I don't know how you can be so sure that someone's not going to call behind you, especially when the straddle is undefined.
I wasn't sure of that, and I didn't like the idea that somebody could be laying in the weeds there. But I really felt like if those 3 behind me called, I knew exactly where I was on the river card. Although there were, a lot of outs on the river with the ace or the 9. I don't think he had to play jack 9 to give him that open ender. So
you make the call.
Or ace or 9, and I probably was going to have to lay it down if he bet into it. But
so you made the call. Did everybody else fold behind you?
So I called. Straddle folded. The cutoff folded, and then the button called.
Yeah,
which really caught me off guard. And I figured that the button was also on a draw because there's 7-6 out there too. There's lots of. And he can be a little bit loose. So that's where we're at. So we've got 33-25 in the pot now.
Yep, 33-25, 853 ways on the turn. Small blind overbets the turn. It's queen of spades, 10 of diamonds, 5 of hearts. It gets checked around again. Heroes in the middle blind, just calling with king 10 offsuit, so flop second pair. Turns the 4 of hearts, bringing a backdoor heart draw. Small blind overbets 850. Hero calls. Fold, button calls. And now we're at 33-25 with about 3,500 left in our stack, in hero stack, something like that. Okay.
And the river is, I think, a really good blank. It's the 4 of spades.
So the 4 of spades. 4 of spades comes here at the end.
Not afraid of that card. Small blind checks.
Oh, small blind checks. Okay.
Yep, I've got him on the misdraw. I check.
Yeah, I was gonna say it only makes sense for you to check here, right? Yeah, I don't think the reason why it makes sense for you to check here is that it doesn't seem like anybody. First of all, I don't think the button's just overcalling with a 10. right? With like Jack 10, where he's going to hero you down. And it doesn't seem like the small blind has that either. So it definitely makes sense for you to check and evaluate.
And I'm hoping to just show my hand down and let the button check, but the button doesn't check.
Okay.
The button bets 2,100 into the 33.25.
2,100?
Yep.
Does the small blind fold?
Pardon?
Does the small blind now fold?
Well, and the small blind's taking time, not too much, maybe 10 seconds. And I'm thinking, okay, if the small blind calls, then I'm out of here.
Right.
But if the small blind folds, I got to be the one to look him up, because this is the way I've played this hand, and I really feel he's on the draw. And now that we've both shown weakness, he was going to try to steal it. Small blind folds.
Okay. So hold on a second. So small blind folds. Okay. So now we're on to our decision point. So the button bets 2,100 into 33.25 here on the river. Small blind folds. Obviously, we know if the small blind called, you would have been out of there, Tony, in a heartbeat, right? You can't overcall. So the pot's 5,400. It's 2,100 for you to call. And then the question now is, I mean, the argument in, sort of against your call is that this is a stronger play into two people. After small blind overbet, you called and the other guy called. Now this guy's betting. The argument sort of in favor is what does he have here that wouldn't have been fast playing off at some point? Like if he had like queen 10 or a set of fives or something like that, wouldn't you get like raised here on the at the end? How now where a guy can really, really eat you alive, and I don't know what this player type would be, is if somehow this guy on the button had a hand like king, queen off here. Okay. If he had king, queen off here and somehow he didn't bet the flop, and then he continued on the turn, and now on the river, everybody checks to him. If I got there with king, queen off and I was the button and I played it that way, I would bet for value 100%. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of players that will just happily check this back. But if you do, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily a polar, but one of the things we talk about at Crush Light Poker, if you really want to be a crusher, is actually depolarizing yourself at the end when a lot of people only bet a polar range. Because if you can bet a hand as played here like king, queen, you become so much harder to bluff catch against in a spot like this. That's the only thing that sort of goes through my mind. Now, people are saying, well, he would have bet the flop with a queen, like king, queen, queen, jack. Yeah, maybe. I'm saying sometimes guys will check it back. But if you say he doesn't have a single paired queen, chat, then what does he have at this point? I'm talking about the button. Like he slow played off queen 10 that didn't bet the flop. If you're saying he bet king, queen, he's just calling with pocket fives.
Yeah, and if he has queen 10, then on the turn when the 850 goes out and I call the 850, he's got to go there. He knows we're on draws. So
now somebody said, could he have a hand like 4-5, which would be like a weak two pair on the turn, and maybe he's playing it somewhat passively because of that large overbet and call. There's two combos of 4-5 suited, 4-5 of clubs and 4-5 of spades. That could make sense.
Yep, that could make sense.
That could make sense for sure. If he's got a set of fours here, there's only one combo now because of quad. So, I mean, you are looking at a pretty thin value range in this spot. I think if I got here like you did in this spot, and I don't think a guy has a queen here, I might hero here for sure. You know what I mean? The pot's 5,400, 21 to call, right?
Yeah, I know the player too, and he's going to 3-bet the king queen. He's not
preflop
smooth calling preflop.
The button player. Yeah.
So I got to tell you, I was not. I felt pretty good about calling. I thought I think I'm good here. So I put the 2,100 in.
So here calls.
He flipped over. Queen 9 off.
Oh my goodness gracious! Now that is one where that's a little crazy. Queen 9 off. Let me ask you this question. When you called, did he say good call?
No. I took enough time that he knew he was good at that point.
Oh, well.
But the thing is, he's not even necessarily good though, because his 9 doesn't even play.
Well, I know that, but I mean, What's the difference when I'm saying like a guy checks back? So he did check back a queen, by the way, guys. People were saying when I'd give him the whole spiel about can a guy bet king queen. What's the difference between having queen nine and queen jack here is that he value owns himself against you if you have queen jack or king queen. I would assume you would 3-bet here with like ace queen almost all the time pre-flop, right?
I would have 3-bet with that.
Yeah.
But I could have called with king queen pre-flop.
Right.
And on the turn, when the small blind bet out over pot with my king queen, if I had king queen there, I could have just called there too.
Of course. Well, I mean, if you go back and replay this whole hand, I talked about that. I said, is it possible when I was making the argument, which I don't necessarily agree with, for you calling turn, I said, could your call be so strong that like a hand like a queen and queen nine might fold out behind you?
Yeah.
But it didn't though.
No, and my big question to you, in fact, what really my real interest in getting this call to this hand to you is I really feel strongly that he needs to bet the flop with queen nine when it checks around to him on the button. And I've asked 3 different real quality players that I really respect, and all 3 of them say check. And that I'm kind of going out of my mind thinking, what don't I understand about poker? Because when it checks around to him and he's got queen nine, every card is a bad card for him. So doesn't he want to kind of thin the field there with his queen nine?
I'm going to pretend like he has queen nine suited so that we can still have this conversation so people don't lose us because they'll be like, oh, the guy's got queen nine off. Now, is there a scenario where button versus cutoff, a guy calls with queen nine suited? I think that there is. I think that you might have some flaws. So let's pretend he's got queen nine suited here. If you put me on the button with queen nine suited against 4 people on queen 10-5, am I always betting there? I'm probably betting a lot. I think some people will check almost as like a little bit of a pot control to pick off bluffs. And the other thing too that I said about this that's slightly different, again, if you look at pre-flop configuration here, what I mean by pre-flop is where is everybody pre-flop? Remember, the pre-flop raiser is to his immediate right, which means that if you tend to agree with me that everyone is checking blind to the pre-flop raiser, the small blind, you in the big blind and the straddle all have very undefined hands if they're checking blind to the pre-flop raiser. So one could make the case that queen nine might be okay as a check back just to see how the hand develops, how the card comes out on the turn, and how to react to the upfront players on the turn card. Whereas if the pre-flop raiser was somehow first to act, let's say we were in a different configuration where the pre-flop raiser was UTG, and then you had like 2 or 3 flat calls in the field, and then we overcalled on the button with queen nine suited, got this flop, and then it got checked to us. That's much more of a bet, I feel like, with queen nine, with the field callers checking after the pre-flop raiser checked, than maybe here on the button because of these undefined hands coming out of the blinds in the small blind U and the big blind and in the straddle. That would be the argument. I don't think it's a must bet. I think that I would probably be betting a fair amount. But I think it is interesting though, Tony. Again, a guy like this, if he knows he's value betting queen nine here at the end and he wasn't like turning it into a bluff, he becomes much harder to bluff catch against. The only thing that I would say though is that like it could be really, really thin where, does he, like a lot of people, if you do the hand reading, if I'm on the button here and I'm doing the hand reading, I don't think queen nine should be a bet here at the end because I don't think you, Tony, should have a 10. Like this is like a game of chess here. Like you shouldn't have called on the turn with king 10. I think you should have like king queen or queen jack here a lot. And I think more often than not, that makes queen nine a check back as played. Like he almost has to know that you somehow have a 10, but who's calling the 850 with 3 people behind him with just a 10? I mean, I know you did, but so that's my take on that hand. But thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.